When the skies turned red and the sirens cried, we found each other in the world's last light.
War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth.
We need a talk.
Yes.
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I'll mark it on your map. Go find out what they need. We could use more settlements supporting our cause.
I don't think that's short for anything, because I don't know what it would be short for. Zippy, Zipperick, Ziptholomu.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
I'll start with a statement that, at least in my view, shouldn't be controversial at all. There's the real Fallout, and then there is whatever Fallout has become. Todd Howard and Bethesda, along with the absolutely atrocious Fallout show on Amazon, deserve most of the criticism they get, and probably more. But this isn't just a video about that. Because to understand what Fallout is now, you first have to understand how far it has drifted from what Fallout originally was, and for many fans still is. Bethesda's Fallout is about as closely related to the originals as Frankenstein's monster is to the bodies it was stitched together from. Some would say it lacks soul, and honestly, they wouldn't be wrong. Fortunately, where Bethesda fails, mods deliver. Today we're taking a deep dive into one of the best Fallout mods ever made, Fallout 1.5 Resurrection. Resurrection is a Czech developed mod, with its English version being released in 2016. It tells a brand new story set between the events of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. Geographically, it takes place in New Mexico, east of the NCR and the original Fallout 1 map, so a place that feels somewhat familiar yet still is unexplored. We will be taking a deep look at the whole story, so full spoilers, but before that, let's talk scale. Resurrection offers around 25 hours of gameplay with a world map roughly the size of Fallout 1. Interestingly, despite the similar scale, it actually seems to feature more quests than the original game. That's something I appreciate, and Fallout 1 had a beautifully measured design. It delivered everything it needed without overstaying its welcome. Resurrection largely hits that same sweet spot. That is especially impressive for a mod. Mods often mistake more for better, cramming in half-baked systems, bloated mechanics, and mediocre content in the name of ambition. Fallout 1.5 Resurrection avoids that trap entirely. One of its greatest strengths is how clearly it understands Fallout's design philosophy, and more importantly, how competently it executes on it. This isn't just imitation for nostalgia's sake, it's a thoughtful continuation. Technically speaking, Resurrection is built on Fallout's 2 engine, which brings some welcome quality of life improvements that weren't present in Fallout 1. Like the extremely useful ability to move companions out of the way when they're blocking your path, without having to shoot them in the balls.
Underneath the broken sky.
Character creation is largely unchanged. Our guy, Modman, is going to be slightly min-maxed. We start with Gifted, which gives us +1 to all special stats at the cost of lower starting skills and fewer skill points per level. The downside can be felt early on, and we're going to offset it by taking Skilled. Skilled boosts our overall skill levels but limits us to 1 perk every 4 levels. That's not really ideal, but manageable. I can live without most perks, and I do want the freedom to push skills like Science, even though I haven't tagged it. The goal here is to experience as much of the game as possible. If you're not familiar with the classic Fallout design, this matters a lot. Older Fallout games will frequently lock side content or alternative solutions behind repair, science, or speech checks. Usually it's one of those three. This doesn't go quite as far as something like The Age of Decadence, a game I will cover at some point in my lifetime, which straight up expects multiple playthroughs, because entire quest lines and locations are inaccessible depending on your character build. Still, Resurrection clearly leans towards that old school philosophy. For our special stats, we go with 10 agility and 10 intelligence. That gives us plenty of action points and a healthy amount of skill points every level. Luck, unfortunately, has to suffer, which is far from optimal since it tanks our critical hit chance, but sacrifices had to be made here. We put 8 points into perception since I plan to focus on energy weapons with a bit left over for strength and endurance. Charisma stays at 5 because we'll only be running a single companion. For the tact skills I take speech even with low charisma. More dialogue options means more ways to resolve situations, and in games like this that often translates to better outcomes. The other 2 tags go to energy weapons and repair. If Resurrection behaves anything like the original games, and it does, the early game is probably going to hurt. We'll be stuck using guns or melee weapons for a while, neither of which we're particularly good at. It'll likely take some time before we even see an energy weapon. And with that, we're off. Let's see what Fallout 1.5 Resurrection has in store for us. The do-it-yourself intro cutscene leaves a lot of things deliberately vague, which I actually like, but it still tells us everything we need to know for now. We wake up semi-conscious in a cave. There are mole rats around. If you don't get out, we're going to get eaten. Simple enough. And yes, the rats are back. Now, I don't really have a problem with the fact that every RPG seems to begin with you beating rodents to death, but in this case I'll choose to see it for what it clearly is, a nod and a tribute to the opening of Fallout 1. We wake up with no memory of who we are, no idea how we got here, and only a strange talisman in our inventory. That talisman is our one and only lead, and the starting point of our journey. The real problem down here isn't the mole rats, rat scorpions, or whatever else wants us dead. The real problem is our guy here. I'm bad with guns, worse with melee, and absolutely incompetent at unarmed combat. At least we start with a few stimpaks, a knife, and some bizarre one-shot pistol that would probably make Todd Howard cream his pants. It vaguely resembles the pipe gun abominations from Fallout 4. After fighting our way out, taking more damage than I would have liked, we finally leave the cave. It doesn't take too long before we meet our first local, who points us towards New Hope, a village that feels very much like Shady Sands from Fallout 1. This is our introductory location, and it plays the role perfectly. New Hope offers light questing, a few small moral choices, and some information about the surrounding area. In other words, this is a classic Fallout start. New Hope is a small farming community, mostly cut off from the outside world. And judging by what we can hear, that might actually be for the best. The nearest town, charmingly named Rat Hole, is described as a constant war zone. Most of New Hope's residents are refugees from there, and none of them seem to be too eager to go back. The quests here are appropriately local, herding and guarding Brahmin, delivering a letter to the brother of an emigrant who now lives in New Hope, small problems, small stakes, exactly how an opening area should work. The main moral conflict revolves around a necklace belonging to the doctor's wife. She's immediately established as deeply unlikable, treating you like Brahmin dung. This ties into another quest, a missing child. If you have already cleared the nearby caves, you probably found both the boy's corpse and the necklace. The truth is grim. The child stole it and was killed by the rat scorpions. If you reveal the full story, the grieving father won't just lose his son, his child will be remembered as a thief and nothing more. We choose to tell the truth, and without really exploring the alternatives. It turns out mostly as expected. The doctor is grateful, his wife becomes marginally less unbearable, and her husband will now make healing powder for us, provided we bring the ingredients. The father of the dead child, meanwhile, refuses to speak to you ever again. And that's a tutorial of sorts, for you to remember what Fallout is. Choice and consequence. You can do anything, but you will have to deal with the fallout. And yes, I'm aware of the pun, I'll see myself out. These quests aren't extraordinary, but they don't need to be. They fit the location, they establish the tone, and they ease you into the world naturally. But one thing becomes immediately clear. Fallout 1.5 Resurrection is dark. Really dark. A dead child thief shunned in memory is tame by this mod standards. In most games, that would be one of the bleakest moments. Here, it's just a warm-up. Since no one in New Hope knows anything about our talisman or our past, we decide to move on. Red Hole might be a shithole, but it's a shithole with more people, and more people means more information.
Underneath the broken sky.
Ah, a rat hole. No, not that one. But damn, when I think of Fallout, I think of places like this. A town utterly ruined. Substance abuse, prostitution, stabbing, shootings. And no, it's not about the violence itself. It's about the hopelessness. The grim, grounded reality of what places like this would almost certainly become after a nuclear apocalypse. Fallout at its best isn't spectacle, it's consequence. Red Hole is a town completely destroyed by the conflict between two men. Julian ruling the south and Leonard holding the north. The reason for this conflict is as old as time itself. They love the same woman, but it's not that simple. The woman in question, Maria, was murdered. Both men blame the other for her death. With no compromise possible, the only solution either of them sees is violence. And we are dropped right into the middle of it, along with what's left of the town. This way, Red Hole is cleanly split in two. Julian controls the south. He has weapons and ammunition, but he's lacking drugs and medical supplies. And it's hard to wage a war when you don't have a stim pack to fall back on. Up north, Leonard and his right-hand woman, Alexa, control the drug trade. They're rolling in camps, but they're short on guns and ammo, and it's hard to stab someone when they're holding a shotgun. So it's up to us to decide whether this situation can be resolved and how. But first things first. I didn't plan on using companions in this run. I rarely use them in games like these. But there is one exception. In one of the houses on the south side of town, we meet a guy who's locked an apparently aggressive dog in a back room. I can't really blame the dog for being aggressive, considering the guy's planning to eat him. We pay the man off with some caps, take the dog off his hands, and with a bit of old beef jerky we just happen to have in our pockets, we recruit our new best friend, Matt. He will be with us for the rest of the journey, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Julian and Alexa both offer us exactly the kind of missions you'd expect. Julian wants us to acquire drugs and medical supplies from Alexa so he can finally make his move. Alexa, on the other hand, wants us to get ammo and weapons for her people so she can make hers. Both sides think the same thing. We're new in town, and neither suspects we're playing both sides. Julian also tells us about Maria's father, George. The former mayor of Kirtland, as Red Hole was once known. He's a beggar now, living in the south. Julian lets him stay there so he doesn't starve. That generosity feels conditional. George gives us the full story. Julian and Leonard were once best friends. They came to Kirtland together and opened a business. It turned out to be very successful. Then they both fell in love with Maria, and that tension slowly destroyed their friendship. Leonard eventually left their shared business and started his own. When Maria was found dead, everything collapsed. The rivalry turned violent, mercenaries were hired, blood was spilled. And the result is the ruined, divided hellscape that Red Hole has become. George also gives us some leads. We should investigate Maria's grave and, more importantly, look into the notes of Dr. Reed, Red Hole's former physician. Some clues might still be in the former belongings of Dr. Reed. Even this early into the mod, the world building stands out. Take New Hope, the first village we visited. It's believable. It has a well, crops, Brahmin. People didn't just decide to build their settlement around an unexploded nuclear warhead. It's a small, self-sufficient community that makes sense. Red Hole makes sense too. Without the backstory, the conflict might feel over the top. Where would these men get the resources to hire mercenaries after the world ended? But the history explains it. Julian and Leonard were successful businessmen before everything fell apart. They had money, influence, and connections. When Maria died, they had the influence and means to get to power. Food here is not easy to get. Drugs and weapons dominate the economy. Civilians are almost gone. Nothing here feels random. These places weren't just thrown together, they were designed with intent. And honestly, the comparison to Fallout 3 and 4 isn't really flattering for the newer titles. After some investigative work, which includes paying a gravedigger to dig up local graves so we can rummage through them, we gather enough evidence to prove that Alexa murdered Maria. Apparently she was jealous of Maria as Leonard was in love with her and she was in love with Leonard. In classic RPG fashion, we confront her and she confesses. And in a rare sense of logic, as RPG villains often make grand confessions to random strangers and leave it at that, she then immediately tries to shoot us in the head, which makes sense. Making the best out of a bad situation, we report everything to Julian. That gives us the option to attack the north with his mercenaries. We take it, partly because it's the logical outcome and partly because it promises good loot. The fight is long and messy. Our main job is basically to soak up bullets so Julian doesn't get burst down instantly. Eventually, we take out Alexa and her mercs. The loot is solid. After trading and scavenging, we upgrade our gear, better weapons, leather armor, and a 10mm SMG. That's a nice improvement, even though our gun skill still sucks. At least now we can burst fire and hope something hits. Most of our level ups have gone into speech and lockpicking, so our combat skills are still pretty underwhelming. But that's fine for now. I'm still holding out the hope that we'll find an energy weapon sooner rather than later. With most of what Red Hole has to offer wrapped up, we collect our reward from Julian, some weapons and a bit of ammo. Turns out that Alexa also murdered Leonard, a tragic end that brought death both to an innocent girl, a friendship, and a whole town. We decide to move on to Sedit, a place we've heard mentioned more than once in Red Hole. If there's anywhere we might learn more about the talisman, it's there.
Underneath the broken sky.
I'm fully aware that our charisma score isn't great, and if this were Arcanum, our beauty stat would probably be doing us no favors either. But I genuinely didn't expect us to be this bad at making friends. Just outside of Red Hole, while traveling through the wilderness towards Sedit, we're immediately ambushed by a heavily armed and extremely unfriendly group of ghouls. They make it very clear that they've been looking for us all across the wasteland, and they seem just as eager to kill us as they are to remind us of that fact. After dying a few times and engaging in some light temporal manipulation, also known as save scumming, we manage to take them out. And among their weapons, we find something far more interesting. Every single ghoul is carrying the same type of talisman that we have. Of course, that doesn't answer anything, but it definitely deepens the mystery. I really like how the game handles suspense here. You're confronted with an obvious question about your past and the larger story, but the game refuses to rush the answer. Instead, it gives you space to speculate. You're not handed crucial information immediately, and there's no quest marker pointing you straight to the truth. You are actually investigating. Eventually we reach Sedit. It's a trade hub that is surviving on its caravan business, a lucrative center of commerce and everything bad that comes with it. After exploring the town, we meet a midget trader. Wait, am I allowed to say this on YouTube? After exploring the town, we meet a trader who is obviously a dwarf, a totally accepted fantasy character. Among the special goods he's offering, we find him selling one of those talismans we found on the ghouls. He says he's got it off a dude who came with a caravan. That's not really a clue that moves us forward in any direction, but at least we know that the talisman that is tied to our whole personal mystery is not unique, and seems to be more of a thing many people carry with them. And these many people are usually ghouls. Since we were attacked by ghouls and found such talismans on them, we might be pushed to the conclusion that we have some sort of beef with ghouls, and that we had a talisman on us because we killed some. It would be logical that we were injured and lost our memories in one of those fights. Seems plausible, but we'll see. We can make a lot of caps in Sedit if we're willing to risk our lives as a caravan guard. Although the age bracket on this channel is more than reassuring, there still might be some of my younger audience here watching this and expecting, dare I say, fast travel. Well, I'm happy to inform you that there actually is fast travel in Fallout 1.5, and this is it. And it's actually the best way of doing fast travel, as an in-game mechanic that has its benefits and downsides. The benefits? Well, you get paid to do it, and you're immediately moved to one of the main settlements. The downsides? You can only do it on certain days of the month, as caravans are not organized and set out into the wasteland every day. And yeah, there's this thing that you have a very high chance of getting shot or mauled to death while you're on the way, which, as it turns out, happens a lot. Obviously, the ghouls seem to be a little bit, well, aggressive in this take on Fallout, since they're not only actively trying to kill us, but they ambush caravans as well. Instead, we find a house or a motel full of ghouls. They're being pushed out of the town by various people, so much so that they need to be guarded at all times. We investigate a little bit and show our talisman to René, one of the ghouls, and he actually recognizes it. He tells us that the ghoul that's staying upstairs has one, but he's in really bad shape and seems to be pretty close to dying. We enter the ghoul's room, and he recognizes us instantly, and not really fondly. It turns out that this particular ghoul was part of the group that ambushed us and shot us in the attack that caused our memory loss. We clearly didn't go down without a fight though. He's lying on the floor of a filthy motel room slowly dying. He tried to crawl back to his fellow ghouls to warn them about us, but he never made it. As we listen to his voice fade, he suddenly pulls a knife and tries to stab us. Lacking the strength to finish the job, or, well, to stay alive, he dies before doing any real harm. At least, now we know one thing for certain: the ghouls are after us. Spooky. We don't really know why, but we know they won't stop. You might be aware of the fact that we're playing a role-playing game. So let's roleplay. Based on what we know so far, the situation looks like this. The ghouls want us dead. They're nearly succeeded. There is a lot of ghouls. We are very much outnumbered. Even with Mutt and his eternal friendship, that's not a great position to be in. The logical response is to find allies. Safety in numbers, even in Fallout. During our stay in Sedit, we already heard much of a large city to the south, Albuquerque. And more importantly, we've heard that Mutant Hunters operate there. And Mutant Hunters really don't like ghouls. So our friend, or the enemy of our enemy, is some dude that really hates mutants. Plan is simple. Reach Albuquerque by signing on as a caravan guard. In practice, it's anything but simple. Several attempts end with us getting completely wiped out by ghoul attacks on the caravan. These attacks conveniently give them another chance to finish us off. These guys are heavily armed and some of them are even wearing power armor. Eventually, we do get lucky. We finally make it to the town. So let's find those mutant hunters.
Underneath the broken sky.
The town is under siege. That much is immediately obvious from the makeshift defensive walls, little more than piles of trash reinforced with car wrecks and scrap metal fencing. The mutant hunters who control the town are heavily armed, and for good reason. There have been multiple ghoul attacks in the past, and Albuquerque has become a prime target amid rising ghoul activity. The city itself is divided into two parts. There's Albuquerque proper, ruled by the mutant hunters, and then there's the so-called Imperial City, which grew around a vault that very clearly made effective use of its GEC. Entry into the Imperial City is tightly controlled. You can only get in if you receive an invitation from one of its citizens. The relationship between the mutant hunters and the Imperials is an uneasy alliance at best. They cooperate out of necessity, mainly because both sides need to defend against ghoul attacks. But the tension is very much palpable, and their long-term interests clearly don't align. We'll see more of that soon. The Mutant Hunter headquarters is one of the few buildings in town that still looks functional. One of the hunters quickly points out that the talisman we're carrying is a known symbol of a ghoul movement called Rebirth. The mutant hunters are also very interested in buying these talismans, because each of them implies a dead ghoul. Rebirth, as it turns out, is some kind of ghoul cult or religious movement. They are organized, well-armed, and in possession of pre-war technology. These ghouls have already wiped out entire towns and villages, and they have been abducting humans to an unknown location. We're also introduced to Sebastian, the leader of the Mutant Hunters. Unfortunately, he doesn't know much more about Rebirth beyond the basics. The cult is led by someone known only as the Savior, and Albuquerque is the last major settlement in the region that's still standing. The ghouls have tried and failed to take it multiple times. After hearing our story, Sebastian becomes intrigued. He suggests that we may have been one of the humans abducted by Rebirth, and that we somehow managed to escape. That would explain why Ghoul Patrol seems so determined to hunt us down. Sebastian gives us a special mission. If you want answers, our best bet is to investigate a former mutant hunter outpost that's now been taken over by super mutants. We might be able to sneak in there and learn more. Why? Well, the mutant hunters at the outpost managed to interrogate a ghoul and get some vital information about Rebirth. However, before they could get it to the main base, the outpost was overrun by super mutants. The mission sounds suicidal and stupid, so naturally we agree. At this point, it's time for some more LARPing. If nothing else, we need protection, and joining the Mutant Hunters makes sense. There's also a moral argument to be made. Super mutants and ghouls have been rampaging across the wasteland, and someone has to stop them. There is also one more bit of important context here. The world is fully aware of what the super mutants did in the past. Sedit, the caravan town we visited earlier, is partly populated by survivors of the destruction of the hub, which was wiped out by the Master's army. This history still matters in Fallout 1.5. In classic RPG fashion, we can't just join the Mutant Hunters outright. We need to prove ourselves first. In a less classical RPG twist, the very first thing we have to do is undergo a medical examination to confirm we're a pure human. Any mutation and we're out. Probably out of this life as well. Luckily, we pass. We're given 3 tasks. Completing them will earn us full membership with the Mutant Hunters. The hardest one is probably acquiring a pulse pistol, which is Imperial equipment. That means finding a way into the Imperial City and obtaining one. The other 2 tasks are more in line with standard Mutant Hunter work. First, we need to assist Butch, the gate guard, on a routine patrol to inspect the city's defenses. Second, we're tasked with dealing with a group of tribals. Due to the recent ghoul attacks, many refugees have arrived in Albuquerque, and reports suggest one of the tribals may be showing signs of mutation. Our job is to convince him to come with us, which realistically is going to end in violence. Before moving on, it's worth zooming out and talking about faction mechanics. Joining factions in RPGs isn't just about replayability. More importantly, it's about world integration. About making your character feel like a real part of the setting and giving the developers a framework to react to your choices. I'll bring up Gothic again because it's a great example. Its faction system is built on 3 key pillars: exclusivity, choice, and reactivity. Your faction affects dialogue, access to areas, and how the world treats you. For example, being a fire mage in Gothic changes how paladins interact with you, and it grants you authority you wouldn't otherwise have. The original Fallout games didn't go quite that far, though they did have reactive systems. You could join factions like the Brotherhood of Steel or even the Master's Army. Fallout 2 had strong examples as well. Becoming a slaver and receiving the forehead tattoo would lock you out of quests and make the NCR hostile to you. Fallout 1.5 doesn't invent anything fundamentally new here, but it refines these ideas. The faction dynamics go a bit further than in the originals, likely influenced by later RPGs. That is a smart evolution. I also appreciate the effort-reward loop here. You work to join a faction, and you're rewarded in a way that reinforces your new identity. It's not as nuanced as Gothic, where armor and uniforms are deeply tied to factions, but it's clearly inspired by that philosophy. In any case, joining the Mutant Hunters makes sense for us. The patrol with Butch and the tribal mission seem manageable. Getting the pulse pistol from the Imperial City is the real challenge. While searching for a way in, we meet Chuck, a really greasy looking weapons dealer. He offers to sell us a pulse pistol for 12,000 caps. That's a very steep price and probably not worth it, but it's an option. Resurrection, like the original Fallout games, is fairly forgiving when it comes to making money. Caps aren't really a long-term problem. The Mutant Hunters and locals also strongly recommend visiting a nearby bar, mostly for the girls, but we go there looking for information. Inside we spot an Imperial guard who is investigating someone named Anonym, apparently a rebel or anti-Imperial agent. A few moments later, another guy approaches us offering us work against the Imperials, essentially working for Anonym. Fallout Resurrection loves setting up these dual conflicts and forcing you to choose sides. I don't think that's a bad design philosophy, though sometimes the duality is presented a bit too bluntly. Being approached by both factions within seconds is a little bit contrived, but that's a minor nitpick. The thing that could have been done here is move one of the agents to another location so they could basically contact you in another context. We agreed to help the Imperials mainly because his invitation grants us access to the Imperial City. The Imperial City is very similar to Walled City from Fallout 2. For obvious reasons. It's another settlement that grew around the vault after using a GEC. The citizens seem isolationist, condescending towards outsiders, and obsessed with maintaining their utopia by keeping the wasteland at arm's length. That's very annoying, but understandable. Proving that their fears are justified, we managed to rob an Imperial storeroom and acquire a plasma pistol. It's not the specific weapon we need, but it's still a huge win. We finally have an energy weapon now, the only combat skill we're actually competent in. Ammo is expensive, but the Imperial merchant stocks enough to keep us supplied. Now this is where Resurrection goes places the original Fallout games rarely dare to, not to talk about Bethesda's take on Fallout. While exploring the Imperial City, we meet a mother whose child is missing. We agree to help. During our investigation, we meet Zachary Brauman, a city guard official who clearly knows more than he's letting on. With enough speech, we get him to talk, but he insists that he can't trust us unless we get to know each other better. Basically, the dude wants to bang us. This is obviously a throwback to the dude in Morrowind that wants to bang you as well when you're a male character. However, this haha funny situation is about to turn bleak really fast. I'm not really comfortable with how these things are turning out, but I let it happen just to see where it goes. After getting the Imperial Premium treatment with some Beethoven in the background, Brauman sends us to Chuck, the weird weapons dealer, as he will give us more information on the matter. I thought about reloading after getting the information so I can leave with my dignity, but I wanted to see where this goes. Chuck does seem to have information. He invites us to his basement so he can show us something. And as we enter the obvious R word I'm not allowed to say on YouTube dungeon, he knocks us out and kills us. Game over. We can clearly see the body of a boy in the basement with another child that is still alive being held there. Well, this changes things. Since he's also the guy who has the pulse pistol we need. Now I don't really feel as bad as I would have otherwise for just shooting him and taking the pistol. We reload, head back to Chuck and ask him about the pistol and actually just inform him that we'll be shooting him in the head for it. There is a small problem though, and that is that he is insanely powerful and basically one-shots us. I try several times, to no avail. I guess okay, I'll pay like the paycock I am, but I'll just kill him and hopefully take the caps back. Well, we managed to take him out with the pistol, but it turns out that the caps are gone. Not really an acceptable option here. But what if I just attack him without dialogue? That's hard enough, but with some cheesing we managed to take him down and, well, now he doesn't have the pistol on him. So what this amounts to is that you have to ask him to show you the pistol, then initiate the dialogue and kill him if you want him to drop the pistol. Otherwise there's no way to get the pistol, or the money back after paying. We really need more levels to resolve this and a better weapon. But this is not illogical jank, this is a design choice that is meant to get you into a hard fight if you want to take out Chuck for the pistol. He usually gets the initiative and jump on you, and he's more than likely to one-shot you. While thinking about a possible approach to deal with Chuck, I used the opportunity to do the other Mutant Hunter mission with Butch. Okay, Salty from the future I guess here. I think I'm suffering from some cognitive deficiencies in this case because I've been calling this guy Butch this whole time because I was convinced that this dude is a throwback to the guy from Predator and that they changed his name slightly, like, okay, he's Butch and the other guy was Dutch, you know, but no, this guy's name is actually Dutch, so I will be mispronouncing his name all the way until the end of the video because I'm retarded. We're to patrol the city walls and check if everything is okay. Turns out, as so often in games like these, that we're having tough luck. We run into a ghoul patrol with Butch. It's a tough fight, but to be honest, Butch is tougher, and we kind of manage. One of the ghouls drops a laser rifle. Well, not only is that a welcome upgrade, but surely this must be enough to deal with Chuck. Barely. We get the pistol and, well, solve the darkest, most fucked up mission in Resurrection. Chuck was... yeah, you know what he was doing with the children, even the ones without a pulse. But this is Fallout, and man is the cruelest animal. I appreciate when games deal with serious issues and take themselves seriously. I would rather have missions like these that are unsettling but real than theme park, new Fallout 50s music backed shallow interactions that shy away from tackling any serious questions that would have to be a part of a world like this, if you want that world to be believable. The artistic choice to infantilize your game content in some regard indicates that you're not respecting your audience, especially if you expect them to take the game and its themes seriously. If not, there is room for discussion, but the newer Fallout titles want to be taken seriously, often, and rarely deliver the framework for that to naturally occur. Fallout 1.5 Resurrection is not afraid of darkness. Prostitution, murder, child abuse, FEV experiments done out of spite, a girl being handed over to Mutant Hunters because she has 6 toes, without any actual reward, mind you, because you're only doing your duty as a mutant hunter. I understand. Mods have more freedom than commercial releases, and Resurrection uses that freedom to confront uncomfortable realities head-on. Finally, we complete the last Mutant Hunter task. A tribal suspected of mutation needs to be brought in. Our speech isn't high enough to resolve it peacefully, so violence follows. This choice locks us out of some tribal quests, but well, that's Fallout, choice and consequence. With all that done, we deliver the pistol, and Sebastian accepts us into the Mutant Hunters and rewards us with some combat armor. We also learn one last secret. The Mutant Hunters secretly breached the lower levels of the Imperial Vault, and they released aliens to clear it out. The Imperials remain above ground, the Hunters control what lies beneath. I guess the struggle for technology continues.
Underneath the broken sky.
We're now fairly well armed, decently equipped, and finally semi-competent in our core skills. With that, we head south with one goal: reach the Mutant Hunter outpost and investigate. As far as we can tell, this is the only real lead left if you want to learn who we are and how we ended up half dead in a cave. The outpost is a bit spooky, and it's hard to not notice the super mutant guarding the only makeshift bridge over a pool of toxic sludge the mutants use like a moat. Luckily for us, we picked up an old Children of the Cathedral rope back in Sedit during one of the side quests. With that, we disguise ourselves, speak with the super mutant, and hope that they aren't exactly Mensa material. Unsurprisingly, because super mutants are not known to be really smart, it works. We talk our way into the outpost without too much trouble. The bigger problem is what comes next. There are a lot of heavily armed super mutants here. If it comes to a fight, we're not really walking out of here. Not us, and definitely not Mutt, who I'm trying very hard to keep alive. And then we get a little bit unlucky. We run into a Nightkin, and this one isn't buying our story. Worse, it seems to recognize us. After a brief exchange, it makes us an offer. We have to lure Sebastian, the leader of the Mutant Hunters, to the outpost, and if we do so, the Nightkin will help us. It claims it can guide us to the truth, where we need to go to learn what really happened. So now we hit a major choice. Because the Mutant Hunters are not going to be thrilled if we invite their leader to a remote mutant fortress where he can get shredded by miniguns. But at the same time, taking this place head on, especially at our current strength, is basically suicide. This more than obvious speed bump seems to be a choice of the designers. I'm not sure if this is the mod's take on a Caius Cosades moment, basically implying that you have to explore the wasteland and get stronger to overcome this specific point. If that is the case, I'm not really against it, since you can circumvent it rather easily by helping the mutants. The only critique here would be that it isn't really obvious. It lacks indication of what needs to be done next, especially if you're not siding with the mutants. It could leave some players confused on how to continue the storyline. Another interesting thing here, it seems very possible to attempt a power armor cheese at this point, in a somewhat Fallout 2-like Navarro move, where you can get the power armor easily if you know where to go and what to do. If you do betray Sebastian and let the mutants kill him, you can get rewarded with power armor, and you'll also get a chunk of story information that we'll get into later. On paper it sounds like a cheap, early power spike, especially compared to the proper Mutant Hunter route where you have to wipe out the outpost and find the armor deeper inside. But after testing it a little bit, it's not as simple as I initially thought. The first time I tried it, I was already a trusted Mutant Hunter, meaning that Sebastian showed up with a small escort. The mutants killed him easily. But if you try this with a fresh character, before you earned his trust, Sebastian arrives with a larger group of his men. He still dies, but now you're stuck in a nasty fight against Mutant Hunters if you want to help the mutants and follow through. So no, you can't just stroll in, betray him, and walk out with a free suit of power armor 10 minutes into the game. That's actually pretty neat, and it shows the mod authors put real thought into the sequence, progression, and the consequences. In the end, we decide to stick with the Mutant Hunters. And right now, there's no chance we can clear the outpost. That means we do what the game is clearly pushing us to do: back off, roam the wasteland, do quests, and come back stronger. This push for experience naturally leads us into the three major hubs of the mod: Sedit, Korath, and Albuquerque with the Imperial City. Since I'm focused on the main plot, here's a quick overview of what each place offers while we build strength. Sedit is a caravan town through and through. Most quests revolve around the trade, escorts, rival interests, and the business of moving goods through dangerous territory. It also has another, lawless section, basically a zone full of shady characters, a mafia boss, a casino, and hidden raiders. That area is separated from the main town by a tunnel infested with deathclaws, so you can't really access it until you deal with them. If you want to power game, Sedit also has a library that makes skill progression borderline silly. Skill books are expensive, sure, but caps are easy to make and the books respawn. It's effective and also pretty cheesy, but the option is there. Korath is the town I like the least. It feels less polished than the others, like it got less attention in the development. Its main content is a smaller questline about a serial killer, plus a local power struggle between two influential figures over control of the town and its mines. It works, but it doesn't hit the same level of atmosphere or narrative punch as the other major locations. The Imperial City questline revolves around the conflict surrounding Anonym and the hunt for him. There's intrigue, faction maneuvering, and eventually access to Vault 16. There's also a major questline where you can uncover a great conspiracy that will lead to some major leadership changes in the city. There are also a handful of smaller locations worth mentioning. Progema is basically the mod's version of the Glow, an abandoned military site that reuses Glow assets pretty extensively. And noticeably so, more than in places like the Mutant Camp. Then there's also a remote scrapyard which mostly exists to provide a key component needed to repair a generator for one of the major factions, forcing you into another choice. Resurrection also includes merchants and specialists who can upgrade weapons. I didn't get much out of that system personally, mainly because I never found anyone who could meaningfully work on my energy weapons. But it's clearly another layer that the mod tries to integrate. After spending some time exploring most of the map and doing everything we can do to squeeze out some experience, we're finally ready to head back. And this time, it's going to be a fight.
Underneath the broken sky.
We are back, and it's a very bad day to be a super mutant. The fight is brutal. Even at this point, there's no way I would survive without abusing this small building here. It lets me break line of sight and funnel the mutants forward one by one. Without that, I'd be shredded in seconds. Mutt has been leveling steadily and has a respectable health pool by now, but even he can't survive a minigun burst. So for once, I have to leave him behind while I deal with this alone. After dealing with the mutants, we enter the lower levels. They feel abandoned, barely maintained, and in one of the lockers we finally find it, power armor. This is the moment where the game quietly tells you you've entered the endgame. But then we notice something else. In the corner of the room lies a ghoul, barely alive. If you only follow the Mutant Hunter route, the moment feels strange and unexplained, although Sebastian indicates that they interrogated a ghoul. But because we've seen the other side, the super mutants tell us they tried to heal him and failed. There's nothing more they can do for him. As we approach, the ghoul recognizes us immediately. His name is Thomas, and he claims that he was once our friend. We interrogate him like a mutant hunter would, and he's clearly confused by the fact that we don't remember him or anything at all. That's when the truth finally comes out. Rebirth, led by the so-called Savior, is an organization promising salvation to all ghouls. Salvation, in this case, means turning them back into humans. There are two problems. The first is that the process consumes a healthy human, used up by the machinery to fuel the transformation. The second problem is worse. The process doesn't actually work. Any ghoul turned human appears healthy at first, but after some time, their body begins to break down, disintegrating piece by piece until they die. Thomas tells us the truth. We were a ghoul. We were turned back into a human. We are living on borrowed time. That's why our vault suit bears the number 13. We were the 13th ghoul to be reborn. And deep down, we feel that Thomas is telling the truth. The Savior claims he was the first successful subject, using frozen organs and preserved tissue found in the facility, but because the machine is fundamentally broken, he only allows one conversion per year to keep the illusion alive. One human sacrificed each year, one ghoul saved. And in the meantime, they desperately try and fail to fix the machine. Thomas knew the truth from the beginning. He was part of the pre-war team that worked on the project. When we seemed healed, he couldn't bring himself to say anything, until guilt finally got the better of him. That's why he told us. That's why we left. And that's why the Savior ordered us hunted. Once the Savior realized we know the truth, we were branded a traitor. The Rebirth rituals were put on hold until we were found and killed, which explains why ghoul patrols across the wasteland were so aggressively trying to kill us. And then comes the final reveal. The Savior himself cannot be what he claims. If the machine caused gradual tissue decay, there is no way he could have survived this long. His very existence is a lie. And as long as he lives, the illusion of salvation continues. Humans will keep getting abducted, towns will keep burning, so this has to end. Thomas gives us the location of the Rebirth base, along with a password to gain entry. We will need to conceal our identity, either with a rope or power armor, so we aren't recognized immediately. He also gives us a holotape. On it is a Mutant Hunter report meant for Sebastian. It describes everything Rebirth is doing and clearly shows that we are a ghoul. The report notes that we can be recognized by our vault suit, but also assumes we're likely already dead, victims of the failed transformation. Which leaves us with a final question. Do we go back to Sebastian, or do we deal with the Rebirth ourselves before time runs out?
Underneath the broken sky.
At this point, we are already locked into our path. Going back to the Mutant Hunters for help seems like the sensible move, but Resurrection does something really smart here. Before speaking to Sebastian, you must drop the holotape. If he finds it on you, he'll read it, realize you're a ghoul, and your journey ends right there. No speech checks. If you drop the holotape, you can explain the situation to him, at least partially, and he agrees to help, assigning us a squad to assault the Rebirth base. We go along with his plan, right until we actually see the place. It's immediately obvious that this is a terrible idea. The base is massive, heavily guarded, and crawling with ghouls. There's no realistic way we're clearing it with the handful of mutant hunters we're given. So we do the only thing that makes sense. We get rid of the hunters. Well, in a specific way. We just told them to go home, guys. and infiltrate the base using the password Thomas gave us. It seems Rebirth takes security very seriously. We deal with the upper levels rather easily, we hack terminals and even register ourselves as a new recruit to move deeper inside. But the further we go, the more complicated things become. Access cards, patrols, LiDAR control. Step by step we work our way closer to the savior. Then we notice something interesting. On one of the lower levels we're given the option to confess that we are the 13th reborn. If we do, the guards don't attack us, they escort us directly to the savior. Here the game opens up one of its endings. The savior offers us redemption. He knows we've been to Albuquerque, he knows the Mutant Hunters, and he wants us to lead the final assault on the city. If we agree, Albuquerque falls, and we're celebrated as a hero of Rebirth, dead or alive. It's a bad ending, but an actual ending. And honestly, it's more fleshed out than Fallout once you get dipped into FEV conclusion. But we choose another path. At this point we can kill the savior outright. We're strong enough. We can also rig the base to self-destruct, but escaping through endless waves of ghouls before the timer runs out is nearly impossible. However, with high enough skills and especially speech, we can convince one of the scientists that the entire program is failing. We can blow up generators, allowing abducted humans to escape. And deep in the lowest levels, we find the truth made flesh, the other reborn. Those who survived the transformation but didn't die immediately have been imprisoned and hidden away, kept out of sight so the illusion of rebirth can continue. Eventually, we confront the savior again, this time with enough information to challenge him properly, and now the full truth comes out. The savior's real name is Andrew. He was once a mutant hunter. His squad was wiped out by super mutants and he wandered the wasteland alone, wounded and broken, until he stumbled upon this facility. The machine healed his body, but it seems it fractured his mind. When ghouls later discovered the place, searching for a way to regain their humanity, Andrew gave them exactly what they wanted, only it was a lie. He posed as the savior and fed them the myth of rebirth. His real goal isn't salvation, it is the extermination of humanity. Andrew sees humanity as a failed experiment, with nuclear war as its ultimate proof. In classic Fallout fashion, we tear his argument apart using speech, pointing out that he's a former mutant hunter, now working with mutants. So he's basically betraying both sides, a double traitor, a liar to everyone. If you pass the checks, Andrew activates the self-destruct sequence himself and lets you leave. Outside the facility, the credits roll. But honestly, I'm conflicted about the savior as a villain. The master was fundamentally flawed, missing key data. His vision was insane, but internally consistent. Andrew, by contrast, comes off as a nihilist, anti-life philosopher convinced that extermination is mercy, overdosing on Sioran. That said, if you view him as deeply traumatized, mentally broken, mortally wounded, isolated, and altered by a miracle machine with unknown side effects, it works. Not perfectly, but enough. Taken as a whole, Fallout 1.5 Resurrection tells a tragic, compelling story that fits naturally into what Fallout was, and not really what it later became. The final image drives that home. The lone figure in a walled suit walks into the desert. The Rebirth talisman lies abandoned in the sand. It's another tragic ending. While the hero in Fallout 1 had a future of some sort, even after being exiled from his vault and receiving nothing for his bravery, the future for the hero of this Fallout journey is only certain death in painful bodily decomposition and cell death.
Underneath the broken sky.
Let's take a look at the technical side of things. This is a Fallout 2 mod, so you more or less know what you're getting into. There is a config file, but honestly I wouldn't recommend touching it. The mod is mostly stable, but there are some very clear technical issues you should be aware of. First, alt-tabbing. If you alt-tab out of the game, there's a good chance you won't be able to get back into it. In a few cases I managed to get back into the game through the task manager, but I was never able to reproduce that reliably. My advice, don't alt-tab at all. The more annoying issue is crashing during combat. The game itself is stable, but if you open your inventory during combat and start using items, it will very likely crash after a few turns. I don't know why. This was especially frustrating since I had quick pockets. The workaround I used was simple but kinda clumsy. Weapon in one slot, stim pack in the other, and no inventory usage during combat. Not ideal, but better than crashing. Aside from that, most things work as intended. I didn't encounter any hard progression blocks due to technical issues. There is some odd combat behavior, super mutants attacking inactive turrets that were supposed to be friendly, even punching them, but Fallout has always been janky. You can't really expect a mod to surgically remove the DNA. Overall, Resurrection inherits Fallout 2's technical quirks, but remains perfectly playable. The inventory during combat crashes are the worst offender, and once you learn to avoid them, the experience stabilizes significantly. The soundtrack is largely based on the original Fallout OST, with some new tracks mixed in. They fit in well and feel like remixes rather than completely new compositions, which is exactly what you want if you want to fit into the whole Fallout thing. Conceptually, the flow and progression are very clearly inspired by Fallout 1. That's no surprise. Other influences are noticeable also, especially in the faction system and its emphasis on exclusivity. You can't really see everything in one playthrough, and you're forced to commit. Tonally, Resurrection is darker than Fallout 2 and closer to Fallout 1, but even then it goes further. Some content here would never make it into a commercial release. The entire questline involving Chuck is a prime example. This mod doesn't pull any punches. There's also something I can only describe as Slavic melancholy permeating the whole experience. Anyone familiar with games like Stalker or Darkwood will recognize it immediately. Bleakness, cynicism, and a deep skepticism about humanity's ability to recover after a fall. Places like Red Hole, ruined towns, and the moral decay of society, crime, oligarchy, prostitution, alcohol, violence are everywhere. This is about as far removed from Bethesda's Fallout as you can possibly get. Gameplay-wise, the loop is classic Fallout. It feels slightly harder overall, but the economy remains forgiving. Difficulty mostly comes from a handful of very tough encounters, the Mutant Outpost and the Rebirth base being the most obvious examples. Random encounters also add to the challenge. Early game ghoul patrols can absolutely shred you, and avoiding encounters entirely is rare. You could invest in Outdoorsmen, but I don't think it's impactful enough to justify the skill points. Most of the locations are well fleshed out and offer enough content to feel believable and rewarding. Veterans of Fallout 1 and 2 will spot reused assets and sometimes entire layouts, but that's expected and it's fine really. The dialogue is in line with Fallout's original gritty vision, arguably even meaner and dirtier. People aren't friendly, nobody's happy to see you, which makes sense when you're living in a post-nuclear hellscape. A lot of thought clearly went into world reactivity. If something would logically be possible, showing information to an NPC, triggering a dialogue option, being punished for what you are, the mod usually accounts for it. The Sebastian interactions are a great example. Even as a mutant hunter, being exposed as a reborn ghoul is an instant game over. That makes sense, and it's great. While Fallout 3 and 4 drifted away from the RPG core, mods like Resurrection work very hard to preserve it. Skill checks in dialogue, skill checks in locations, entire paths locked or open based on your character build, it's all there. Pair that with a story that's genuinely interesting and emotionally engaging, and the fact that it's free, and you get something special. Fallout 1.5 Resurrection is more Fallout than anything Bethesda has ever produced. Honestly, this feels closer to a real Fallout 3 than the Fallout 3 we actually got. Fallout's rebranding moved it in a very different direction, towards better graphics, spectacle, and a wacky theme park version of the Wasteland. War never changes is still there, but the question Fallout used to ask, what comes after the war and how do humans handle it, has largely been abandoned and infantilized. For Resurrection, the answer is bleak, serious, and grounded in the human condition. For Bethesda, the answer is people living around an unexploded nuclear warhead. So, if you seek, you shall find. If you're a Fallout fan, especially a fan of Fallout 1 and 2, I can only recommend Resurrection. It's pretty much what you would expect out of a Fallout adventure. As always, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video and made it this far, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. And if you played the mod yourself, please let me know what you thought. I'll see you next time.